Hey, Riverland College English major Jeff Johnson here. And I hope I have a little bit of a different look. I have been trying to get my equipment on so you can see your federal tax dollars at work. And I'm shooting my very first video not with my iPhone, but with my Canon EOS RRP. Kind of the dedicated camera that I'm shooting live Zoom classes with, and it's really good to see you today on Monday, September 14th. And got hopefully another half-hour video lesson coming your way. So here's what I have for you today. I have a confession that I want to make, and I made it all day, all morning, to my 2 Comp 1s at Central Lakes College, as well as classical mythology at noon. And it won't take very long to do that. I come from a culture where people, like if you're Catholic, you confess your sins to a priest, and it just gets to be a habit. Pretty soon you just start confessing your sins to everybody, and I won't go into that much, but I got a little bit of some explaining to do. I also, today, it's 3 things in number. A confession first. I've got some very exciting poetry news that involves you. I kind of hinted about that last week, and I'm looking forward to talking about that. And I also want to talk today about rhetorical arrangement. And it's not a lot of scratching to do on the board, but stuff happened this weekend. My son came and helped me and did some, rudimentary training on just the basics on how to use some of the equipment I have. He gave me a couple of editing lessons in Final Cut Pro, so hopefully this will look better than usual. And we got my whiteboard mounted here. So in a minute, just to see how it looks, I'm going to flip this camera and give you a little lesson using the whiteboard that I got just for you. And I hope you are all well down there. And let's wind it all the way up to the top for the confession. And the first part might sound a little bit redundant. We've talked before about how we're all looking over our shoulders, and we want something back that we really don't have anymore, which is the way life was before the pandemic. And that's a personal thing. It's a marriage thing. It's a professional thing. To me, it's a spiritual event. But to focus on us, one of the things that I'm really finding myself missing is the way I used to do academic journals. I mean, it was 34 years in a row. And I'll just take the last 10 years at Central Lakes College. Every Friday, I've hauled student notebooks home, 110 notebooks, usually with about 2 pages of writing in them. And I take them home, and I spend the whole weekend reading them. So here's a way of thinking about it. I'm a pretty drastic, abstract, random ADHD teacher and learner, and I'm not on any medication. And so, like on the surface, I might appear a little bit erratic, and I think I can be erratic or unpredictable. I've been talking all morning about a student who only one person knew out of the 100 students I addressed this morning. I said, hey, do any of you know Chantel Stengel? Well, one hand went into the air, and this woman was just smiling away, and she called out, yeah, on Zoom. Was 1 year ahead of me at the high school. I had a sweet student named Chantel Stengel, who not last fall, but the previous fall, took a Comp 1 from me. She told me in her journal, it's one of the nicest things I've ever read in a student notebook. She told me that my unpredictability cured her of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. I don't know much about that, but apparently OCD people like to be able to predict things. They like to know what's going to happen next. And just day after day after day of her having absolutely no idea what I was going to do, or on a minute-to-minute basis know what I was going to do. It cured her. She threw away her medications. She just stopped worrying about what was next, and she was so grateful to me. And how sad I am that I didn't go to her wedding last year. It's kind of hard when you don't exactly live in the town you teach in. You live in one community and teach in another. So in spite of that, I'm a creature of routine, right? I broke it this morning a little bit. Instead of running 4 miles, I ran 5. But, after that, just to take my morning, for instance, it's pretty much the same thing every morning. It doesn't matter whether school's on or not. I get up and eat the same middle-aged man breakfast that I eat pretty much every morning. Organic strawberry yogurt and blueberries. And I have 2 cups of coffee. Not 3, not 1, exactly 2. And it's the same Guatemalan light roast every time. I can't teach without orange juice. I just can't. I have to have a little bit, even though I know it's not the greatest thing for you. You're better off just drinking water. But anyway, I have a routine. And one of the routines of my life, one of the great routines of my life was the academic journal. Well, now I can't do it like that anymore. I can't take that big case of notebooks home. And this is the confession part, I've been assigning journal entries, and you know what, I haven't really read any student writing yet this year, and this is the beginning of week 4. And I'm going to tell you something. This is me telling you something that's in my heart. Let's talk about my heart. My heart wasn't in it. I'm like, my gosh, I miss those notebooks. And Friday afternoon, after I got done uploading that video to you at St. John's, I gave myself a talking to, and we had a little interrogation, myself and I, intrapersonally. I said, what is the matter with you? You've got all kinds of unread student writing. Yeah, you're sad that you can't have it the way you want it, but you've got to start paying attention to that prose. And I gave myself kind of a talking to, and this weekend I started doing it. Now, I haven't gotten any of yours yet, but I'm starting to get caught up. Forgive me for starting with classical mythology, and I got that and my 2 Comp 1 sections at Brainerd taken care of. And just try to think of it on my end, right? Classical mythology has 38 students in it, and each of them for that first round, I'm just working on the first round of writing. They put up about 80 pages of prose, and I read every word. I don't skim anybody. I read it like the way it was written, one word at a time, because it's important. You got to get about reading student writing and witnessing students' lives and their thinking. And you know what? It really wasn't half bad doing it online. Doing it a little bit differently than the way I've done it before, but I guess my chin's up, my glass is half full, and I think I'm going to be okay if you care. But quickly, let's just talk about the method. I think I've read like 5 or 6 entries in your section down at Riverland. Previously, for some years in D2L, I've put up audio clips where I just talk about student writing. I don't exactly correct it anymore because I don't have to. It just makes me feel like a custodian or a maintenance worker. I've decided that the audio click is too it's too many clicks. It's too many clicks. So the method is this, and you'll see this in the next couple of days. The method is I go to D2L, I start moving through the roster, I put up the writing, and I have my Mac here rigged so when I get the prose up, it's off to the left. I read it, I put the cursor in the text box, and I double click this command thing, and a little microphone pops up, and it's voice recognition. So it's not the greatest writing in the world. In D2L, I'm actually trying to model, at least decent writing when I put something up, or when I write professionally. Maybe I'll share some of that with you because I'm a professional writer. So, but what happens is I put the cursor in, and then I can talk. And it's simple, right? I can say, hey, thanks for these journal entries, period. I really appreciate the way you did this. Full colon, right? You have to speak the punctuation. And it more or less works. Now you have to proofread it because sometimes voice recognition will let you down. All weekend I kept saying the word writer. But apparently the way Siri hears me is I have too soft a T sound. So I kept saying, you know what, you're a pretty decent writer. Well, it would spell out as rider, R-I-D-E-R, as in, you're a pretty good horse rider. It reminds me of a few years ago I was trying to caption a YouTube video, and I said feminist literary theory, and it captioned beneath me, I'm a Nazi. So are we all Nazis, right? So you gotta watch that. So that's how I'll let you know that I'm there, I'm with you, and I've had a change of heart and mind, and for a split second I thought, am I going to keep doing this? And the answer is, heck yeah. So that's that part of today. I've made a confession, and my conscience is a little bit clearer. Let's get to some poetry news. I hinted last week that I would have some exciting news for you, and I really, really do. Quick story. You know that I've been trying to connect high schools to my college using poetry. I'm trying to get high school students interested in beauty. Up in Brainerd, there are 6 or 7 high schools that have sent entire busloads of kids to my poetry readings. Pine River really gets it, and I bring them in and make them feel like special guests, and they are special guests. I make sure they have pizza. I walk them to the Chalberg while the writer's hanging out with my friends and at a brunch, and I make sure that they get the very best seats in the house. I think I've told you too. It's getting difficult to figure out what I've said where to 4 different classes at 2 different schools, but I did bring U.S. Poet Laureate Juan Felipe Herrera and Los Angeles poet laureate Luis J. Rodriguez to Long Prairie Gray Eagle, and I was going to bring Adam Zagajewski there, and that didn't happen. So one of my dreams has been to bring an indigenous poet, right? A poet that represents a native nation, a Native American poet. And it seems like we have fewer of them now than we had even a few years ago. I had, not every project comes to fruition. I had this big plan to host Sherman Alexie. You might know who he is. He's was pretty much the most famous writer in this country that's indigenous. No one had heard of it when I brought it up to my Zoom classes, but I see it on high school bookshelves, piled up. I see his most recent book, Diary of a Part-Time Indian, everywhere. Maybe that's down at high schools. Maybe some of you are attending or have attended. So I was working with Royce Carlton for 3 years on this. His speaking fee is $38,000, and I was going to get it from the Bush Foundation. And I have to admit to you, wow, I guess I'm just confessing all day long, I wasn't that excited about hosting him. He had what's called a rider, which like rock stars get or big-time politicians. In other words, there was a contract that I had to sign to make sure that he had certain things when he arrived in Minnesota. He didn't want anything to do with me. He just wanted to be just zipped straight to the two venues, my college and the Mille Lacs Bend Casino Theater. I was going to bring in a bunch of high schools in the south and southwest shores of Mille Lacs. He wanted a limousine with a professional driver. He wanted to be checked into a hotel with a super secret pseudonym that I was to reveal to no one. I'll tell you it now. It's Robert Basilborn. And he wanted a plainclothes, unarmed security guard with him at every single venue, every door of every venue where he would speak. And that kind of makes sense because he can be very offensive. People want to beat him up. Why was I even up that road? Anyway, the first summer, he had complete and total physical collapse. Then the following summer, with the money just sitting in a drawer, he had a psychological collapse. He just went into a big depression. He's bipolar, and he canceled everything. And not this summer, but last summer, when I was going to do it, man, I got up one morning, went out to my glass porch with a cup of coffee to start the day, and I looked on National Public Radio, and sure enough, Sherman Alexie, in just a flash, had become one of our hashtag Me Too people. You might know what that is. In other words, he was a complete sexual predator, and he admitted to sexually assaulting a number of women in hotel rooms. I'm like, are you kidding me? And that was the end of him. His career's over as a writer anyway. He had to give back awards and stuff. And so then I wanted to bring, I'm giving you too many details, then I wanted to host M. Scott Momaday, the elderly professor M. Scott Momaday, and Bush Foundation wasn't too interested in that. And just, here's where it affects you. I know I keep bringing them up. 11 months ago, your dean, my dean, Kelly down there, snuck to a poetry reading that I hosted last fall, and he got the idea that he and I should work on hosting Joy Harjo together. This is the exciting part. There's a teacher at Riverland who I just became friends with last week. He's a complete sweetheart. You have got to take an English class from John Olseth. John Olseth at Riverland. He's been there for years. And it's too weird to think of him as the Jeff Johnson of southern Minnesota, but he totally is. He's beyond me. This guy we have a lot in common. We're about the same age. We're both parents. We're both dads, husbands. We love teaching English. We're passionate about poetry. And John Olseth has been buying many, many copies of Shel Silverstein's book, Where the Sidewalk Ends, for years. And he's going into elementary schools down there and giving them to fourth graders. So apparently the tradition is so established that in these schools where he visits and has these readings, when they hit the third grade, they're like, yes, next year I get my Shel Silverstein book. Like, it's that big of a deal. He is getting tiny children interested in poetry. Sorry, that's my dishwasher beeping in the back. That's irritating. Just ignore it. It won't stop until I open the door. You gotta not run machines in the house when you're trying to teach. I just came to love the guy in a flash. He apparently was freaked out a couple years ago when Kelly McCullough said to him, last night I went up to central Minnesota and I had dinner with Billy Collins on the front porch of one of my former teachers, Jeff Johnson. John Olseth couldn't believe it. He also could not believe what I've accomplished with Verse Like Water. And he had the idea that he was going to take sabbatical this year, the whole year. We can take the whole year off at 80%, one semester at, you can take the whole year off at 80 and one semester at 100%. But you got to do a project. You got to do something to further your career, enrich yourself. His plan was to drive up and attend all my Verse Like Water readings. That was going to be his project for sabbatical. It's not, it's still going to happen, but he's going to have to do it online. So here's the big deal. John Olsen is the heir to an estate, excuse me, that his dad created for the Tonka Truck Foundation. I know you know what Tonka trucks are. I had them back in the early 60s when they were big and they were just industrial, and I still have a couple of them. I still have my red dump truck. And John and his sister run a foundation for that they can do, things that they want to do. For instance, the books that the Shel Silverstein books are paid for out of that foundation. Well, what's wonderful with me is that John Olsen and I are going to collaborate, and we're going to host Joy Harjo to start our friendship for Riverland College and my college, Central Lakes. And it's already going to happen in the last week of October. Joy Harjo is an indigenous woman. I can't remember exactly the nation that she's from, the native nation that she's from. I think it's in the southwest part of the United States. She is the U.S. Poet Laureate. That is the biggest honor any poet can get. It's a one-year thing. She'll probably be upped for a second year. And of course, the reading will be virtual. Here's what's good news for you. John Olsen is going to buy with his foundation 700 copies of Joy Harjo's brand new book, An American Sunrise. It's really gorgeous, although the poetry is kind of freaky. And many of you, I don't know how many kids are at Riverland, but not only am I going to host the reading online with him, probably in a webinar format, you're going to get one of these books, likely. And you can start building up your poetry book library. I couldn't be more excited about this. I'm not supposed to talk about money, and I think this time I won't, because we've got to keep this at half an hour. So, and I won't read a poem to you. Let's just have Joy Harjo show you what she can do. She's younger here.
A member of the Muskogee tribe, Miss Joy Harjo.
Thank you. This poem is a poem to get rid of fear, and it works. I have before and after pictures. I release you, my beautiful and terrible fear. I release you. You were my beloved and hated twin, but now I don't know you as myself. I release you with all the pain I would know at the death of my children. You are not my blood anymore. I give you back to the soldiers who burned down my home, beheaded my children, raped and sodomized my brothers and sisters. I give you back to those who stole the food from our plates when we were starving. I release you, fear, because you were born, and I was born with eyes that can never close. I release you. I release you. I release you. I release you. I am not afraid to be angry. I am not afraid to rejoice. I am not afraid to be hungry. I am not afraid to be full. I am not afraid to be black. I am not afraid to be white. I am not afraid to be hated. I am not afraid to be loved, to be loved, to be loved. Fear. Oh, you have choked me, but I gave you the leash. You have gutted me, but I gave you the knife. You have devoured me, but I laid myself across the fire. I take myself back, fear. You are not my shadow any longer. I won't hold you in my hands. You can't live in my eyes, my ears, my voice, my belly, or in my heart. My heart, my heart, my heart, my heart, my heart, my heart, my heart. But come here, fear. I am alive. And you are so afraid of dying.
All right, I'm not sure how well you can see this. I'm learning a new thing. I got to work on lighting, right? I got to be well lit if I want to do this properly. It feels a little awkward. Anyway, here's a furthering of your rhetorical training for today, and I have to bust out my big tripod the next time I attempt this. I got my whiteboard up. It's pretty nice too, 4x6. So here's the main thing I want to teach you about writing today. Rhetoric, I've already told you, has 5 houses: invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. We're generally going to be dealing with the first three, invention, arrangement, and definitely style. Memory is not something worth going into other than to say that the ancients had no patience whatsoever for people who did not have a great memory. Delivery is the territory of a speech act. So when I get a commencement address, a commencement speaker ready in the spring at CLC, delivery is definitely something that's on my mind. We've already talked about invention, which is the process through which you go to arrive at your topics for writing and for speaking. And today what I want to talk about is arrangement. Arrangement is about form. We're talking about form, the form of something. And this is really important to understand. And a simple way to put it is this way. Like, let's say you arrive at a topic. Let's say you go through your invention process and you decide to write about one of the requirements for this course, which is love. Well, once you've done that, what you got to do is figure out what you might want to write about love. Just want to make sure that I got some kind of levels going here. Okay, so what are you going to write about love? Are you going to write a love letter? Are you going to write a love poem? Or are you going to write an essay about love? Well, let's just say it's an essay. Every one of you has been schooled, had just nigh unto pulp on the 5-paragraph essay. These, if you can't tell, are obviously paragraphs. I think in terms of units of meaning. And the problem with the 5-paragraph essay is that it works so well that people can't stop teaching it and they can't stop doing it. Ever been here before? Yes, you need an introductory paragraph with 3 body paragraphs and a conclusion that reiterates the thesis. Well, I don't want to throw several 100,000 high school English teachers under the bus because I was there among them once. But the problem is we teach this so thoroughly that students can't do anything but that. And what happens is they don't understand that they can achieve form without being formulaic, right? And it just smells like a 5-paragraph essay. Hint, you don't have to reiterate the thesis. You just don't, okay? ADHD, memory shot. You still don't have to tell me what I just read on the previous page. Do something else. Do something new. And that's just a way of thinking about it. So when I say form is the fulfillment of a desire, I did this today. I said, how many of you like to read novels? And hands went up in the air in my live Zoom classes, and well, you know, let's just grab one. I got a billion of them. Like, you know, One Man's Meat by E.B. White, who I really love. Well, this is a collection of essays. It doesn't matter. When you pick up a novel, you want it to have a lot of chapters, and you want it to be long. And if it's a good novel, you'll be enjoying it. And if it's not a very good novel, you've done this, right? You count the pages to see how long it is until you get to the end of the chapter. I didn't tell any of my CLC students this today, but I don't read novels hardly anymore. Only when I'm teaching my honors lit class in the spring do I read novels. So when you pick up a novel, you want it to be a novel. When you pick up a sonnet, you want it to be 14 lines, right? Unless it's Petrarchan. And it works like that. That thing's beeping, and I don't need this board anymore. So I think you've got this so far, right? We're talking about form. Form as fulfillment of a desire. And that's kind of an abstract idea, so let's end this video lesson by telling you a story that'll make it concrete. Many years ago, I had a wonderful AP English class that was a little bit, Once in a while they got a little bit contestatory because there were so many bright kids in there and they wanted to push back once in a while. And I had a young man in that room who has no idea I'm about to mention his name on the entire internet. And he knows I'm talking about him still because I love this story. His name was Pat Dwyer. And in the spring of that year, Pat Dwyer and all of his friends who were seniors, different demographic, right? Like kids going to just tier 1, tier 2 schools. He was a little tired of school, at least high school, and he gave me this essay that wasn't an essay. I took it home and I pick it up and I'm like, what the heck is this? He didn't have the MLA heading in the upper left-hand corner. It was just like the stream of consciousness, no obeying of punctuational or paragraphing conventions. It was just this blob, and it began in the middle of a sentence. And when I got to the end of the paper, the beginning of that sentence is how it ended. So the idea was I was supposed to go back and reread it again for deeper meaning. He was ripping off James Joyce. If you know anything about Finnegan's Wake, you know what he was up to. A plagiarist. But anyway, I read this and I didn't even know what to do with it. I don't even remember what it was about, but I do remember this. I remember him coming into my old ancestral office and going, "Well, what'd you think of my essay?" I said, "That wasn't an essay." And he said, "Well, what was it?" I said, "I don't know. It was a mess. What is the matter with you? What's happening to you?" He said, "Well, you should be able to classify it." Classify it? Well, it was just a piece of junk. But he really wanted me to classify it because he knows that that's a thing with me. I said, okay, if I had to classify your essay and put it in some kind of type, I'd say it was bebop jazz. He said, what do you mean bebop jazz? I mean bebop jazz. Right? It was just a mess. And I don't remember how the rest of that conversation went, but I do remember what happened when I collected another pile of papers from the students in that course. Every single one of them had the same title, Disaster in the Snow, Disaster in the Snow. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a mutiny. It's a conspiracy. Because that can happen. One kid can talk to another and pretty soon the mutiny spreads through the class like a flu. And I remember going to my old classroom and going, you guys, what's happening here? You're going to Harvard, you're going to Stanford, you're going to Carleton and Northfield. Is this the crap that you're going to hand in? Oh, they started pushing back. They started pushing back. And they had some questions for me. They're like, hey, can't we experiment? Don't you want to explore and experience new literary forms? I said, no, I want to read essays. This is high school. This is AP English, and I want to keep reading essays because my job is to get you ready for college. Well, they were pushing back, and I know what a mutiny smells like. A little word to the wise, if any of you are thinking of becoming teachers. If you're ever in a classroom, I don't care how old the students are. I don't care if it's first graders, if it's seventh graders, if it's seniors in high school, if it's a graduate class. Little tip here: if you're the teacher and they start mutinying, if there's a mutiny on, there's always a leader too. In this case, it was Pat. Little hint: you got to take out the smartest kid in the room. I don't mean like take out, like take out. I mean that metaphorically. You've got to symbolically, intellectually take out the leader. You got to take out the smartest kid in the room, and if you take out the smartest kid, they just fall like a house of cards. Dominoes. I'm mixing my metaphors again, but that's what English majors do. So I'm looking at him going, oh my gosh, you guys are really going for it, aren't you? Who's going to get it? Oh, that would be Randy Shue. Randy Shue went on to get a PhD in robotics from Stanford, and I got near this kid. That's another teacher trick, right? You approach physically, you get, proximate to him. I said, Randy Shue, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and then I'm going to tell you a story about your future. And my first question was, and I really was about to build my house. I was building my house. I remember now because he came out here with Hans Wallner. I said, Randy, out in Western Collegeville on my 20-acre lake property, I'm building a home. Can you tell me or guess what geometric shape it's in? He said, I don't know. Is it a rectangle? Is it a square? I said, it's a little box, okay? Because I'm not wealthy. It's a box, Randy. And boxes work for like right angles for hanging sheetrock. That's the form a house usually is. You can build a geodesic dome if you're a hippie, but I ain't anymore, and I'm building a house, and it's just a little square box, but it's cute. He's like, okay. I said, now I'm going to tell you a little story about you, Randy. The story's this. 10 years from now, you're going to be in a hospital room in the middle of the night. It's going to be 2:30, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. And your wife, who you have not met yet, is going to be giving birth. She's about to give birth to your first child, a son, Randy, an 8-pound, 8-ounce baby boy. And Randy, I'm going to tell you something, young man. When that child begins to emerge into the world, into the light, form is really going to matter. This is going to matter because you're going to want to see a baby with fingers and 2 thumbs. You're going to want to see a baby with little toes. Randy, you're going to want to see a baby with one head, not 2. You're not going to want a 2-headed baby. You want the baby to fulfill the form of being a baby. Can you just write 1 or 2 more essays so we can just get through this school year and get you launched on your lives? And they kind of back down. Randy's just like, okay, Johnson, I give in. It's Borges who says it. Tigers desire to be tigers, and stones, stones. And babies, who I love beyond any singing of it. Babies want to be babies. And that's not everything I know on arrangement, but that's plenty good for today. I'll edit this and I'll get this to you as soon as I can. Oh, I forgot to show you my rig rundown here, my monitor, this camera. It's not important. I think I'm looking better and worse at the same time. That's what my students and I agreed today. I look better because I'm clear, at least on Zoom. You should see this baby on Zoom. But I look worse because I'm 60 and I look like hell, and you can see every wrinkle and every blotch and every inch of my receded hairline. It doesn't care. I wouldn't rather be any part of my life than this one, even in the pandemic. Life is good. As bad as it gets, life is always good. Bless you guys, and I'll have another vid up for you on Wednesday. And I'm going to start reading your writing. I proved it today with a story.